Our last speaker is Heather Rickard. She is the Pírish Plants Division Coordinator for the Karuk Tribe. She is working with her colleagues to build a plants program for increased Karuk capacity for plants knowledge and data sovereignty to support plants-related intergenerational learning, reduce invasive species impact to the cultural landscape, benefit native plants for gatherers, and support tribal people to fulfill inherent responsibilities to place. And today, she's going to tell us about it. Please welcome Heather.
Good morning, everyone. You're all still here. I told some of y'all to go on a walk by now, right? You all can still leave and go on a walk. There's a lot of faces. No, but I feel really privileged to be invited to be here. Thanks to Jane for coaching me through this. I tried to quit a couple times. She did a great introduction, but also just wanted to position myself. I do work for the tribe. I identify as a white settler. I live on Karuk lands, and I feel really lucky we got to come all the way down here to Machupta lands with my crew, and get to share a little bit about some of the work that we've done. So from what I'm going to share today is coming from, some observations that I've made as an employee working for the tribe since 2014, and sort of just some observations we've talked openly about in the community about some common species. All right, let's see if I can figure this out. Bear with me, thank you. So I'm going to take some time to kind of introduce some historical context about this place, a particular place I'm going to focus on, and then share a little bit of traditional Pírish or plant stewardship that are traditional that we try to incorporate in the modern management paradigm, and then hopefully have time to share the actual observations about plants that we've noticed in areas we've been burning repeatedly. So here pictured on the right, it's left on yours, is roughly the area that Karuk people have lived and practiced culture since time immemorial. Like our last speaker mentioned, this is a cultural landscape. There's not a place here or plants that don't have a Karuk name, signaling there's a relationship between people and place to this. And as well as, that said, we put a box around it. We know it's not as simple as that. That's sort of this Western thing we like to do. But it's about 1.3 million acres, 3/8. And I'm going to focus this photo to the right is just as a snapshot of some of the learning that we've done. Is this place is really important to Karuk people. It's a place called Tishanek. It's about 99 acres of very highly disturbed, mostly floodplain, that's sort of grassland and shrubland. So, with the context of understanding that, I'm not going to get into, of Karuk people have been here practicing really complex culture that I could never really understand since time immemorial. This place encountered challenges from settlers around the 1850s, was sort of late in settlement compared to where we're standing today. People came for gold. So you can see this old map. Around 1900, you can see how settlers came in, drew lines for their gold claims. You will also notice that people continued to practice culture. There's even a note in the map that they notice how, it says where Indian people are still living. They continued to persist there despite mining and so actually here pictured Savoram Dali in connection to this place still utilized plants and for these baskets, and a number of her descendants are in the crowd here today. Woo. Also of note to this time period, it was that burning, the main cultural practice for land management, fire, was outlawed around the turn of the century and with the Weeks Act. That said, people did not stop, but continued that practice, risking criminalization. So then fast forward another half century. This is that same place. What you'll notice here is that the mining is only ramped up. This is the pathway of a dredge that has you can see disturbed the vegetation there in this aerial photograph, and kind of moved the river channel and is straightening it out. Also challenging and affecting the disturbance at this site and flood patterns is mining that's occurring up and down the river, but also dams. 6 dams were constructed during this period, roughly, upriver. So again, this elder, Georgia Orcutt, in her basket here pictured, we have some descendants in the crowd from her as well, continued to stay at this place and utilize willows. And again, as these flood patterns are changing, it is becoming even more important that people are using fire for disturbance of some of these basket materials. All right, skipping ahead. So by the late 90s, there have been 2 really big floods that you all are probably pretty familiar with in 64 and 97 that have further disturbed and sort of changed and straightened the river channel in this area. Also, in this second half of the 20th century, Karuk Tribe was restored to federal recognition, but it's worth noting that we're never granted a reservation. So actually, that was earlier on as the Klamath Forest Reserve. But that 98% of Karuk Aboriginal territory by this time is in Forest Service. Has the Forest Service jurisdiction laid on top, although Karuk lands were not ever ceded. And then 2% is in private. But in this modern context is when, because of federal recognition, some Karuk leaders initiated the Department of Natural Resources, which really brought Karuk people and tribal values into a modern management context. So fast forward to this workforce. And so the mission of the Karuk Tribe Department of Natural Resources is, what we're really asked to do is to incorporate traditional values into modern strategies and to preserve cultural and processes and living things. So getting into, fast forwarding. So this is when I came into the picture in terms of being involved in this work. There was a wildfire here at Tishonik in 2013. So this area, I neglected to say, was in private land ownership, despite the continued use of it and the resistance to colonization by Karuk people. And this wildfire, one positive that came out of that was that it devalued the property enough so that the tribe could buy it back, and so they did that. And basically, ever since that same year, as soon as the paperwork went through, we burned it. There was a tribe-led prescribed fire for cultural objectives. And so part of what is really special about this place is now that it's in Karuk, restored to Karuk ownership. So granted, my colleague here, Asia, we all have to jump through all the hoops of being NWCG qualified. Now we can burn every year. So this place has been burned every year since, at least once. we founded a plants program just 2 years ago. Pírish is the Karuk word for plants, but from the Karuk dictionary, you can see it's kind of people, it sounds like have used it to just sort of describe like herbaceous and plant-like things. We're trying to ground the work that we're doing in traditional values, and at the center of plants and Pírish stewardship is the use of fire. So here are some quotes from some elders about fire. So for intentional fire, Bessie Tripp points out that, that setting fire, that's what people use to grow plants, which is for food, fiber, medicine. And then even in some, discussion, Phoebe Maddox was talking to, it's an early ethnographer, about managing for like corms and bulbs. Oh no, 5 minutes. Oh gosh. Okay, well I better fast forward. So yeah, basically it's still about fire. So this is what we're doing. So here's straight into the observations. Well, you all might not be surprised that we've seen a lot more wildflowers. And so that's something people talk about in the community. In fact, we've had enough to gather this claytonia and bring them into the schools for school lunches. Also, geophytes or tayith. We've noticed that they've been more abundant and bigger, also in areas where people have gathered and burned repeatedly. There's like more diversity of growth ages. Notably, in our June burning, mugwort in particular seems to really be revitalized and come back without competition from invasives when we burn around that time of year, and gatherers have expressed that the quality is better. We've also noticed, just interestingly, it's so volatile that it seems to help drag fire into the willow, which we're trying to top kill, even under cooler conditions. So that's kind of cool. So sandbar willow, I know I showed you all some baskets earlier before. Not all of them, but some of them are woven with this willow. And for this to be utilizable, the sticks have to be straight, have to resprout, and they have to not be buggy. Maybe something Dawn can help with. We just talk about it like bugs. I don't know. I'm not sure what insects they are. But if there's a bug hole like the one in this here photographed, it's just not usable. They break. So for an example, this is, a couple years after one of our burns that it starts to be less accessible, and the sticks start to get branchy, and you can't weed with them anymore. So again, when we come in, we can get a successful top kill, then they resprout and they're nice and straight. That said, our burns are not really addressing the insects yet. They're still getting buggy sticks. Also, this is an example of cut and pile and burn in this area. You can see that it grew back. Here's the tender green shoots on the upper right, but that within 2 years, it's just not accessible for gatherers anymore, but there's not enough thatch to carry fire through there for a couple more years. So then getting into some observations about invasive plants. So blackberry is one of our biggest problems and challenges that honestly I bring to this crowd and ask for help about. You can see here, it seems to be revitalized from just fire generally, especially with our fall burning. You can see it, we're without repeated fire, it's sort of these walls of blackberries. They burn hot, like the photograph here on the bottom. But actually, we are a little bit hopeful that the June burning seems to inhibit them, as in, like, when they keep resprouting the rest of the summer, they don't quite recover to the cane height that they were before. So one of the things we tried that I'm going to show you a couple photos of is we did try to seed in these sort of hot, burned areas some native grasses. And the hope there was to create and provide a thatch that could then allow us to top kill and burn the blackberries in the summertime when all the resource would be above the ground, and before the blackberry had built up all the dead thatch down below. And so 1 year afterwards, you'll see the grasses did really well. But then by the second summer, the blackberries are there. The second summer here, they're recovering. And so we did burn it again this June at the second ever Karuk Indigenous Women's Trucks. And so far, we just have observations through this January, which is that, yes, you can see the canes. The recovery is not quite as big, but I'm not really sure. We just don't really know how well those grasses survived. We did do some seed collection, respreading afterwards, but I'm not sure. And now we found out that the grass that we purchased had cheatgrass in it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, right? That's how we feel. So it's just really bringing up whether or not, like, if that's aligned with tribal. So far, there's a feeling like that's not aligned with tribal values, is to do harm while doing well. So trying to do good. So we're bummed about that. I'm gonna this is just a real quick, the only data. This is from our partners. Oblong spurge has really benefited from fire with follow-up manual treatment, and this graph essentially is showing that, like, there are increases in the population of seedlings following fire that, when addressed, we're working toward and getting closer to eradication. I kind of just added this at the end because this is actually a huge makeup of what's happening at Tishonik, is the invasive annual grasses. And so when it comes to thatch and kind of maintaining and restoring this fire regime of, like, annual burning in June, these grasses are more cured at around a traditional time period to burn. And, like, you can kind of see, this is not a great example, but you have to believe me, it was true, that the native grasses that we did plant, I know this is a lower elevation, so it was wetter, but in the other areas, but I didn't have a photo, they were still a little bit more green compared to the annuals, so that when we did burn in June, I don't feel like it quite burned as hot. So, we kind of discussed, like, the tribe, might want to, like, keep utilizing the invasive thatch. But if we can use, native grasses, that would be preferable. So yeah, in summary, June burning seems to really help reduce invasive plants. I know I gave just a couple examples. I kind of didn't get into, like, star thistle seems to reduce because I didn't have good photos. Also, Scotch broom seems to be reduced, seems to be top killed a little bit more. And it seems to really stimulate native plants. Also, the seed sources is kind of a lesson. I'm eating to my questions time, but I guess for this, in summary, I feel like this is a really great example of what happens when land is restored to an Indigenous community. Because apart from just the photos I've shown you all today, I can say that this is a place that's super actively utilized, gathered. It's bringing a lot of energy, family, youth activities, community gatherings, kind of all associated, sort of this momentum that has capacity to build, and I feel like has everything to do with the fact that that it is owned and managed by the tribe at this point. So yeah, we're going to be looking into some large-scale radical restoration of this floodplain with partners. And so that's going to play into how we utilize fire there and the vegetation, communities, and what's possible. And thank you, and big shout out to the Pírish crew in the back, Anna and Ruby, best people ever. And happy birthday, Ruby, everyone. Okay. Happy birthday. I'm out of time. Thank you. Happy to chat about it.